Alrighty. Good evening, guys. Welcome to a continuation of Python fundamentals where we're discussing functions, right? In this lesson, we're just going to dive a little bit deeper and into functions in Python, right? So the objectives of this video, right? I just want to show you how in Python, when you create a function, you don't necessarily have to return something. You can just display or cause an effect to happen, right? And I'm also going to speak about the non-type and the function and scope, right? So in the previous video, I showed you how to create, we basically spoke about positional arguments and keyword arguments and how you can combine them. And in those functions that we created, the 1 parameter, 2 parameter, and 3 parameter functions, you could just see that I wasn't really returning anything. I was just printing out to the, and I say I wasn't returning anything as a variable, right? I wasn't storing the results of whatever calculation that we were doing as a variable. I was just printing it out to the terminal or to the screen, right? So remember, just the same, we've seen this flow chart before, or just an explanation of what a function is. You have an input, you pass it into your function, the function manipulates it and then returns it to the user, right? So function effects and results, right? So remember the keyword to return an operation or the result of an operation in Python is when you're using it in a function, you use the return keyword, right? So if you look here below, we have this force. You've seen this, we created this function in the previous video where we calculated the force, giving the mass and acceleration. And now we return the result of this operation, of this calculation, mass times force, right? And we can use that and store it in variable. Now, return, I highlighted it blue, is a Python keyword. Therefore, you can't use it as a variable name or as a function name. So return without an expression, right? So now here, there's an expression here. Over here, there's not an expression. So the return essentially causes an immediate termination of your function's execution. So look at this one called access control. So if this person is a student, say, well, default value of this is true. And then we say print good day, right? And if not true, right? Okay, let's just, if not true, right, return. So this would, if not a student, so if this person is not a student, then we would exit the function, and then we would now say print welcome blockchain to welcome to blockchain 101 if they were a student, right? So if true, if not false, if not false becomes true, and then this function wouldn't execute. But I can show you this. I'll show you this in a later video. So the instant causes an instant return to the invocation point. So essentially, in your code, it'll just go back to the point of where the code was, where you actually called the function. And sometimes it's executed implicitly if function not intended to produce a result, all right? So return with an expression. So just like before, the return causes immediate termination of the function's execution, and then it evaluates the expression's value and returns it as a result, right? And then we have the non-type, which is a special type of data value that doesn't represent anything. It is not a value, cannot be used in operations, and is essentially used to, you can assign it to a variable as a function result, or sometimes you can even assign it as a parameter, keyword parameter, right? So, and then from there you can do some manipulations with it, right? And then you can compare it with a variable to check its external state. So remember, the non-type is implicitly returned when a function does not return a value. So now if I was to check the type of this, if I created a function and I said print, and I now set type on that function, and then you would see it would be a none, right? Now, function scope essentially is where the code, part of the code is recognizable, right? So if you look here, we have a function called example function, and what is this variable? And we say var, right? And then here, when we're executing we call another variable called var, and then we invoke our function and we print var, right? So what would happen here is now Python, when you invoke the function, Python will now look for this var variable within the function scope. And as you can see there, we did not define it anywhere within the function. Then what it will now do will now look for, if it can find this var outside of the function, then you see it'll be there, and then it will not execute the function. What is the variable? And this would be 1, right? And then it will still print 1 once you get there. So a variable that exists outside of a function has a scope inside the function body. So that means that just like what I just explained, this variable can be seen within the function, all right? Excluding functions that define a variable of the same name. But if I had this var in here, the function would just use the var and not use this. But I'll show you this later in the videos when we're coding. Like, scope of a variable outside of a function is only supported when its value is read, right? And then you have a global keyword. Now this is used to extend the a variable scope, right? So let's say I wanted to, in my function, I wanted to manipulate or modify the value of a function, of a variable that's not within the function. So I can use this keyword global. And then what this would now do is now, and I'll say, I want to modify, essentially what it's saying is, I want to modify the variable in the global scope, right? So, and this variable is in the global scope, that's outside of the function. And then what would happen is I now change it to 2, and here it's 1, but then I invoke the function, and this is, okay, I want to modify this and set it to 2, and this would come out to 2, right? So the key takeaways: return keyword tells us a function to return a value. Is a keyword that tells a function to return a value. The return statement exits a function. Remember, it immediately terminates the function. So anything that you have below it will not execute. Always remember that. Anything below return function will not execute. I think in some IDEs, they will even give you a warning that this is not going to execute because it's below it, unless you put it in like an if else block or something like similar like that. But we'll get back into that later. Result of a function can be assigned to a variable. Any data type can be used as an argument to a function. Any data type can be used as a result of a function, right? Remember that. A variable outside of a function can be used inside a function's body. I showed you that in this video. A variable defined inside a function only has a scope inside the function. The global keyword can be used to modify the scope of a variable. All right, so now let's move on to